So we're very lucky tonight to have Nicole Libin present. For those of us who've experienced Nicole in the past, you'll understand why I say this will be a real treat. So Nicole is going to talk tonight about mindfulness for contentment. Cultivating a peaceful mind and heart. Mindfulness is often framed as a tool for stress relief or overcoming suffering. While valuable, this approach sometimes makes it seem like mindfulness is solely focused on eliminating negative states. How often have we heard mindfulness that we all suffer as a way to start the introduction? This workshop will focus on using mindfulness to cultivate contentment. Interesting, she uses the word contentment, not happiness. Maybe we'll find out why. We will explore how to nurture contentment without falling into either toxic positivity or apathy, and how to use mindfulness and meditation to create a less overwhelming, more peaceful mental space. So let me briefly tell you about Dr. Nicole Libin, a certified mindfulness educator, adjunct professor at Mount Royal, and author. She's designed and facilitated mindfulness curricula and other courses for mindfulness schools, Mount Royal University, and private organizations. She was the co-creator and lead teacher for the Mindful Schools Mindful Teacher Certification Program, training and certifying the next generation of mindful educators. Nicole is also an author, 4 books on mindfulness. Her children's book, Sticky Brains, a mindfulness and brain science picture book for children, is her latest offering. Her other 2 books, Mindful Parenting in a Chaotic World and 5-Minute Mindfulness Meditations for Teens, has been published by Rock Ridge Press and is available on Amazon. So I will turn the evening over to Dr. Nicole Libin.
Thank you. It's a good time to come. How are you? Like reading. How are you?
Good.
Yeah? Something kind of, sort of, a little bit tired, anything, right?
I feel contented.
Excellent. I don't even have to have this talk then, we're done. So we're going to start out with just a really short meditation that I will guide everybody through. You can change posture, you do not have to. You can close your eyes or just take a soft gaze a little bit in front of you. Taking a few deep breaths. And then allowing your breathing to return to its natural rhythm. And simply, kindly, curiously feel what it's like to be you sitting here right now. You don't have to make anything happen. You don't have to stop anything from happening. We just put in a little bit of effort, and the rest of our effort goes to witnessing. You can witness the feeling of your breath going in and out of your body. You can witness what it's like to hear the sounds outside this room. You can watch the part of your mind that likes the sounds or doesn't, that judges something is good or bad. And for just this moment right now, we just get to let all of it be here. feeling what it's like to breathe in, feeling what it's like to breathe out. And every time the mind wanders or gets caught up in judgment, we just know that that's okay. And that's what minds do. And as soon as you've noticed, your mind is already back here. So every time the mind wanders, we notice and we gently invite the attention back. Feeling what it's like to breathe, feeling what it's like to hear and to sit, and allowing all of that to be just as it is. And feeling what it's like to breathe in, feeling what it's like to breathe out. And for the final moments of this brief practice, I'd like to invite you to offer yourself some care, to offer this present moment, whatever it is, however it feels, some kindness. So breathing in and breathing out. And then perhaps taking a deeper breath, or two or three. And when you hear the sound of the bell, in your own time, whenever you're ready, opening your eyes, raising your gaze, and bringing your attention back into this room. Thank you. It's the funny thing about these tingsha, these bells that you hit together, is I have never been able to actually hit them together the first time. It's always a little bit of missing first. It's why I have them at home. It's one of the reasons I never use them. It's quite awkward. All right. Teaching about, well, really, I was going to say about contentment, but talking about anything to do with mindfulness is a really curious thing, because everything that I want to talk about tonight, you already know. You already do. You already know what contentment is. And you already have the ability and often engage in mindfulness of being content. We already know contentment. We obviously already know discontent. Sometimes the latter is a little bit easier to touch into than contentment. And this has been said so many times before, and yet I'm still going to say it again, this notion that mindfulness is actually really easy. The hard part is remembering to do it. And it's really the same thing with everything that I'm going to offer or suggest for contentment. Again, it's that quality you already have, you already do. Where I get lost a little bit is letting go of what I think contentment is versus what it actually is. And for me, this is why I make a distinction between happiness and contentment. So I was asked initially to do a talk on mindfulness and happiness. And I said something like, if we can call it happiness and contentment, I'm in. For me, they're very different. And we'll talk about what contentment is and why I see them as very different. I'm gonna skip ahead and then I'm gonna come back to the happiness bit, because if I say it in context, it'll make a little bit more sense. What I want to talk about with respect to all of this is contentment in a way that talks about the practice of it, right? Because again, we all know what it is, but a lot of my experiences is like, great, I know what something is. Like, I know how to be mindful. I know how to meditate. Great, I know all of it here cognitively. But when I really need it, knowing it kind of doesn't matter some of the time. You've had that experience. Like, I know all the right things to do, but in that moment, I don't always do them. And that's about everything in my life, not just with respect to mindfulness. So I'd like to talk about this in a way that is accessible, where we're not trying to address this perfect picture of someone who's like never upset, right? Oh, I'm always content, like nothing ever rattles me. I don't know if such a person exists. I am not that person, decidedly not that person. So what I want to suggest is that contentment isn't that. It's not about getting rid of everything that we don't want. And it's not about getting everything that we do want. And in some ways, I think it's more reliable than happiness because of how we relate to it. So let's start at the beginning. I'm getting ahead of myself. What is contentment? You'll have to excuse me. I'm in total professor mode. I just finished my semester today. So I started looking into this and I was going to just talk, but it's a lot less interesting if I'm the one talking the whole time in my mind. So if you would think of a time when you have been content. Right? We're not defining what it is at this point, but just, is anyone willing to share a time, a moment, a nanosecond, where you would have described your experience as contentment? Anyone? Big moments, small moments. I will accept any moment. Yeah.
I feel contented now.
Lovely. Anyone else? A moment of contentment. Can you think of one? And right now it's just how you define it. I haven't even defined it yet, so it's whatever you think. Yeah, please.
For me, it's just like these really ordinary kind of things that happen. Like, even driving here tonight on Rochelle, you know, traffic's so smooth, just such a relaxed, pleasant drive.
Love it.
I'm content, right?
Love it.
In the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in the moment.
Costs me nothing, just, you know.
Love it, yeah.
Yeah, that small things.
Love it. Anyone else have a similar or totally different understanding or experience of contentment? Please.
I go to visit my old dad
Okay,
almost daily.
okay.
But I find that as soon as I walk in the door, I just get this, it's kind of peace, but it's contentment.
Yeah,
I'm in the right place at the right time, and time slows down.
yeah. Really lovely, thank you. So a sense of contentment just sitting here right now, something that doesn't feel that exciting, maybe like the drive over, but it just feels easy, right? Nothing particularly pressing. The sense of something maybe you do every day, but that you care about, visiting your dad. A sense of things slowing down. Anyone else? Please.
So I think it's whenever I am not wanting things to be other than they are right now.
Dude, you just like answered the whole thing for me. That was amazing. It's like a plant. That was beautiful, right? That's what it is. I'm serious. That's what it is. Yeah. What's discontent? Can you think of a time, and why is this so much easier, where if I asked you to come up with a time where you don't feel content, or you feel discontented? It's almost the opposite of your excellent answer that you just gave us. What's a time where you feel discontent? I have so many. Here, yeah, go.
Both. And I'm not thinking of particular moments, although
No, that's
God knows
fine.
there's lots of them, but for me contentment is sort of like accepting it is what it is.
Yeah.
And discontentment is railing against what is.
Beautiful. Again, it's like y'all don't need me here. Cause but this is what I'm speaking to. It's not all I'm doing is pointing to, it maybe in different language, but to something that you already know innately. Wisdom you already have. Experiences you already have. But what we're doing is just trying to, how do I remember that in that moment, right? Like, how do I implement it? How do I feel it in my body, not just sometimes know it in my head? There's no test here, but if it was like, okay, how many people can come up, how many discontented moments can you come up with? It's somehow easier to come up with those, right, than the more contented ones. That's not our faults, that's how our brains work. If that ever happens to you, that's your brain trying to keep you safe. Our brains are really good at keeping us safe. They're not always great at keeping us content, because those are two very, very different things. So looking at all the answers for contentment, looking at all the answers for discontent, what do they have in common? Well, we already have the answers here, right? Contentment is not, I call it irony. Contentment is not about content. In many ways, the contentment part of it has nothing to do with the content, that is what is happening, right? I can be content, I'm just driving here. I was not particularly content driving here, I have to admit, right? Because I wanted it to be different. I wasn't okay with, I'm not a fan of driving, so I want it to be different. It shouldn't be like this. I don't like this. Why are these roads like this? This person's flashing in my face. Anyway, the contentment isn't about what's happening. The contentment is about my relationship to what's happening. The discontent isn't necessarily about what's happening. Certainly, conditions make it more likely that I'm going to feel a certain way or have a certain relationship. But have you ever had the experience where you feel content and things aren't great? Like, it's not the, we have the sort of the neutral one, right? It's not the perfect circumstances, but I'm okay. I'm content with it. Content enough with it. Again, the other one's often easier. Can you think of a time in your life when things were good, right? Maybe you're on vacation, on a holiday, I don't know. Birthdays are a pretty good one, right? It's like, oh, I have all this thing and it's this party, and have you ever felt not content? this is where the practice piece comes in, is because it's not about manipulating or trying to control this moment. Because most of the time I can't. And this kind of brings me back to what mindfulness is for me. Lots of many different definitions of mindfulness. The way I look at it, one of them, is mindfulness is about this truth that there are two things happening in every moment. There's what's happening, and there's my relationship to what's happening. And a lot of the time, I cannot change what's happening, right? This is the best city to talk about this, right? Weather in Calgary. Whatever you think of it, however you feel about winter, and all the cold we've had and all the snow and whatever's happening now, right? Your relationship to cold, snow, weather, etc. will dictate your level of contentment related to it. I have a friend who loves the cold. She loves it. She loves it when it gets dark. She loves it. She's like, this is it. This is my thing. This is my time. Meanwhile, I'm like, no, the best season is autumn. You're clearly wrong. And I was content back then because everything was nice for me. And now I'm just, grumpy. But my grumpiness, I actually really like winter, but my grumpiness doesn't change the weather. It only changes my relationship to it, which actually kind of changes everything. So for me, that's what contentment really is. So what is contentment? You said it, right? Being with what is, as it is, not fighting it, not resisting it, as much as we possibly can. Discontent is the opposite, fighting it, right? It shouldn't be like this. This is my favorite phrase. I've used it here, I know I have. But when it comes to ourselves and our contentment with ourselves and this moment and how we see ourselves, we get so caught up in the shoulds, right? It should be like this. It shouldn't be like this. Why am I like this? I should be different. And again, as I've said before, one of the things that helps us move towards contentment is this sense of we have to stop shoulding all over ourselves. It's as funny as I get this email. I did say that to my students, thinking I was being all clever, and one of my students actually said, are you saying shoulding or shitting? I was like, okay. So if I can't change what's happening, then the one thing that I can do is something, again, you're all doing all the time. It's that awareness, it's that mindfulness, kindness, curiosity, interest. There's so many things that we can't control. And a lot of the time when we can't control them, we just try to control them more. Right? It's scary and it's a protective mechanism for sure. I'm uncertain, something's uncomfortable, so I actually tighten up around it. I get tight and tense. And that leads to more discontent, even though I'm doing it in service of trying to feel better. So to be clear, contentment, again, I said this, but it's not making everything okay, right? All perfect, everything's unicorns and rainbows and exactly whatever temperature you always want it to be. But it's also not pretending that everything is okay. Pretending everything is nice, or ignoring, I'm just going to relate to everything in a contented way, so I'm just going to ignore that problem because that kind of makes it's harder to relate to. That's a trap, and it's what in this talk I refer to as toxic positivity. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with this as a phrasing. Okay, some of you for sure are. I didn't know it was called toxic positivity until, social media came around, but to me, it was always that kind of thing when I'm having a rough day or someone's having a difficult time struggling with something. And the toxic positivity or toxic positive response, I suppose, is, come on, cheer up, right? It's a beautiful day outside. Or, well, people have it worse than you, you should just, or why don't you, right? Don't be sad. Oh, don't worry about it. That one's always my favorite one. Don't worry about it, right? Like, oh, really? Oh my God, thank you so much for telling me. I thought I had to worry about it, but now I realize that there's an option. I'll take that option. Right? Like I've often, it's that sense of like, if I could, I would. I'd happily not worry about something. But that's where my patterns are. So the toxic positivity piece of this, and where it kind of can move into something that I don't think is helpful, is where I work so hard on feeling a certain way that I'm trying to get rid of how I actually am. Does that make sense? Kind of, sort of. I'll talk about it more.
Can you give an example?
For sure. Many, probably. It's the difference, I suppose, for me, of if I'm having a rough day or a rough moment or a rough time. I guess it's the difference between, I'm just going to pretend it's not there, right? Oh no, like everything's fine. And then the toxic positivity piece of it would be, oh, just cheer up, right? I would argue that a more skillful response here is like, yeah, I am having a rough time right now, and that's okay. It's not gonna make my rough time go away, but it's not adding that layer of you're not supposed to feel like this to it. To me, that's a really important distinction. It's how I relate to the rough time. It's how I relate to the happiness, to the drive over here, right? To anything. And that's something that we can practice. Because if I rest it all on having all the perfect circumstances, I'm always going to fail. Because I don't control those circumstances. But that's where the practice, that's why we practice mindfulness. Why it's called the practice of mindfulness, because we practice, right? The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And then you forget to do it, and then it comes back, and then you forget to do it again, right? This is this whole learning process that we all get to be a part of. So we still get to be human, right? We're still gonna get caught up in pain and judgment and shoulds and all of those things. Because of course we are, because that's part of what being human is. And so when those come up, again, all about relationship, it's seeing that and letting that be okay. Yeah, this is a rough time. That's okay. Can I hold myself with compassion? And compassion and contentment and patience and all of these things, we know this, there's skills that you can get better at. You can practice, and the more you practice, the better your brain gets at those. So for those of us for whom this doesn't come naturally or doesn't feel like it comes easily, and if you're with me on this, there's something really nice about this, because it's like, oh yeah, I learned how to ride a bike and I learned how to do this sort of thing, and this is actually something that I can also learn how to do. And just like learning a language, or just like learning to play an instrument, the first time I was not good at it. And the second time I was not good at it. Maybe 50 times later, I'm still not good at it. But the more I practice, the more it becomes part of how I see the world and what I do. All right. So right now, if I suggested to you that you're going to perhaps consider a taste of contentment here and now, what happens? Not for me, but just notice for a second. If I just say, okay, just imagine that you all of a sudden feel just a little bit more contented. What do you notice happening? Anything, maybe nothing. Yeah.
Sort of a sense of calmness,
Yeah.
stillness and quiet.
Sure, maybe. And none of this is going to be true for everyone. This is just like, this is why we do this practice and why we talk about it, because you get a sense of your own felt experience of it. And the words might resonate and they might not. There's a thing that for me happens and I don't know how to describe it, but I know that sort of sense, that feeling for me. So maybe it's a little bit of a sense of calm. Anyone else? It's like invite some contentment
My
in you.
inner monologue stops.
Interesting. Yeah. Maybe the volume gets turned down for a little bit.
I get discontent if it goes up.
Yeah, yeah. That's a fascinating thing to notice and a really powerful thing, right? Because it goes both ways. If I notice the contentment and I notice something like the inner monologue goes down, then I can be mindful of what that inner monologue is doing in order to see my relationship to it. So it's not just like, oh, I have to, this has to happen in order to feel a certain way. As we're building that capacity for it. Anyone else want to share a little bit what contented contentment feels like? Yes, please.
Well, I feel glad to be where I am at the time. I'm not thinking, I wish I was somewhere else. Yeah. And someone else or something.
Yeah. I wish I was somewhere else or someone else doing something else. Yeah.
And surprisingly, I'm not thinking a lot. So it's that thinking part of my mind that's sort of suspended.
Yeah.
And just sort of
Sure.
calm the mind.
For sure.
Peacefully. Yes, sense of peace.
Yeah. So then it's the same question, right? And to be clear, you can be contented and be thinking, right? A lot of that is am I aware that I'm thinking, right? The inner monologue's a really good one, because a lot of the time I'm talking to myself. I don't even know that I'm doing it, but I know it's having an impact. So the quieting down of it sometimes is the quieting down of the volume, the content, and sometimes it's just that awareness of it. But yeah, it kind of just fades into the background. So then the same thing with peace and contentment, I can ask sort of the same things, right? Like, what is peace? A moment of peace is still, it's not getting everything you want, and it's not getting rid of everything you don't want, generally speaking. But it's, oh yeah, I don't have to want to be somewhere, I'm not wanting to be somewhere else, or not wanting to be somewhere else, not doing something else. We are not encouraged in this way most of our lives, right? We all you have to do is look at advertising. Social media is another huge one. And pick whichever one resonates most for you, right? Advertising and social media in many ways are both predicated upon this idea that, I'll be happy when. Oh, if you buy this thing, then you'll be happy. If you do this thing, then you get rid of this thing. Wear this, have this cream, put it on your face, then you'll be totally contented with how you look, right? Because we'll have fixed magic cream, we'll have fixed all problems. There's this thing of not being enough. And then whatever you do, whatever you buy, whatever your $19.95 3 easy installments will fix that. And then you buy the thing, maybe this is kids and Christmas sort of thing, right? I buy the thing, and then maybe I was happy for a second, and then it kind of goes away. Because the things aren't fulfilling that, it's the relationship to it. So to me, circling back, please disagree with me on this, as with everything I should have specified on that, is that anytime I'm sharing anything like this, I am never selling anything. So it's just some particular viewpoints that you might consider and sort of try on and see how they fit. And if they fit, great. And if they don't fit, great. So where I land with happiness, I don't like the word, to be perfectly honest. Because the way that happiness, I think, is often sold, and this is my own background and experience, it's sold as this thing that I'm supposed to be in all the time. Right? I'm supposed to be happy. Happiness is this state. I'm supposed to be there and I'm not supposed to get out of it. And if I'm out of it, there's something wrong. I see both contentment and actually joy very different than this view of happiness. And again, it's just my view. Joy to me are these moments of, I don't even know if I can define it, but just that sense of just being maybe it's where happiness comes in. I don't have the words for this, just overwhelmingly happy, right? Overwhelmingly joyous, this sense of just lightness and just, this is where words fail. This is why we have dance and poetry and color, because it describes things in a way I can't. And we get those. Again, I can ask, what's to describe a moment of joy? And you've all had them. But what's the thing about a moment of joy? Even my hand, right? Joy is here, and I only know this because I've experienced this. And then sometimes I can't see on the thing, but sometimes I experience this, and then I know this, right? I know things in relationship to other things. Again, it's about this relationship. And so for me, the happiness piece is a little bit tricky, because I believe, again, this is on me, that to know something like joy, or what I think happiness really is also to know sadness and anger and frustration and jealousy and all of these things. So it's not that I don't like happiness, it's that as it's usually framed, I feel like it's impossible for most of us to reach, because it feels to me like a state, whereas contentment to me feels like a relationship. And a state I'm gonna get every once in a while, and when I feel it, that's amazing. I love that. And there's certainly ways you can move towards happiness as well. That's someone else's talk. But for me, contentment's something that I can actually regularly practice, and I don't need anything particularly spectacular to be happening or not happening. Just like this moment, like I said, just invite in a little bit of contentment, right? How you're sitting here, what it feels like to be in this chair. Like, what would it be like to just really be content sitting in this chair in this room? Do I need to do anything? Not really. Can I just be okay with it as it is? Maybe. And so moving into this, what we do, how do we do it? Number one, the title of this group, Wellness Through Mindfulness, and the title of this talk is Mindfulness. There are all sorts of different, like I said, definitions for mindfulness, but also framing for mindfulness, and one of them is friendly, caring attention. Mindfulness goes with equanimity. Equanimity, my favorite definition, is caring without interfering. It's really hard. I like interfering. I'm really good at it. I like problem solving and fixing things and analyzing them. Anyone else? It's really good at it. The first part of the contentment is acknowledging things as they are. So that's where I'm not just going to pretend everything's great. I'm not gonna gloss over something. I get to actually say, you know, this is really hard right now. And I can care for myself as it is hard right now. And then mindfulness really is this practice. Awareness, kind, friendly, loving, non-judgmental awareness. And so much of that, and this is again for me where contentment comes in, is seeing that sometimes things feel great, sometimes things don't feel great. And part of what that is letting yourself feel great when you feel great. Like enjoying the crap out of something. It's an awkward phrase, but there you go, right? If it's something feels lovely or it's pleasant, I just get to enjoy it because it's here. I'm just gonna acknowledge it and be with it because it's here and that's beautiful. And also it's gonna go. Everything comes and goes. So when it goes, I don't have to try and get more of it or grab onto it. It's just like, I got this beautiful enjoyment and now it's like this. And then the same thing when things don't feel great. Yeah, this is really hard right now. That's okay. I get to acknowledge that for what it is. And also know that it's not going to stick around forever. Even though, you know, when we're really in it, it feels like it will stick around forever. Oh, I can keep track of time. Okay. There's one I'm going to suggest, again, to make this a little bit, to keep it practical as much as possible. The first bit of practicing this is the noticing, the acknowledging, that question of what is being experienced, what is being known right now. And that's just one of those things, like, is checking in a little bit every day. Checking in as much as I can in a moment, practicing a formal meditation where it's what you're doing. Am I aware of what's happening in this moment? The noises outside are just amazing to me. There's a whole life going on, a whole world going on outside of us. The practice that I'm going to suggest, it's a version of something that comes from the Buddhist tradition. And I like it for its simplicity. And you don't have to be a Buddhist to practice this. There's certainly analogous approaches. The language is it's just language we don't use. So words like valence or affective tone, right? They don't really roll off the tongue as well, but it's the same thing. In Buddhism, or in certain Buddhist traditions, the approach is called Vedana. It's Vedana. And Vedana is this deceptively simple, really it's not actually, it's just simple, but not easy, practice. It's everything that we experience in every single moment, at all times. We immediately classify, like before thinking even, according to this tradition, we classify as one of three things: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. All the time. Now, of course, this is subjective. Of course it changes, right? What I might find pleasant in a moment, you might not, as with my friend who loves winter and cold, and I don't necessarily. Why this is a helpful practice for something like contentment is because after I realize or I notice that I connect to something as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, there's a period afterwards, or a just before that. So it's just pleasant, period. It's just unpleasant, period. It's just neutral, period. And the key bit of this is pleasant is not the same thing as positive. And unpleasant is not the same thing as negative. You can think about that for a second, because it's so intertwined in all of the language and messaging that most of us get. So I can experience something pleasant and fully experiencing like that moment of joy. It's pleasant, it's lovely, without chasing it, without trying to get more of it, without identifying with it. Oh, it's a pleasant moment, okay, and then it's gonna go. And then the unpleasant, like it is. I don't have to pretend it's not. I don't have to, don't be sad, that toxic positivity part of it. It's unpleasant. It is. I acknowledge it. I am aware of it. I'm mindful of it. And then I don't have to resist it. I don't have to try and push it away. It's okay that it's unpleasant. I don't have to like it. But I can not like something with awareness and compassion. And I can not like something with gripping. And the tighter I grip, the more impact it has on me. There's a phrase and there's a metaphor, an image really, that I find helpful. You can decide if they're helpful for you. With respect to that sense of should and resistance and the fighting the moment. And the phrase is let go or be dragged. And the image, that one's actually pretty evocative, but the image is like rope burn. And in many ways, to me, this speaks to what this whole idea of contentment is, which is, what am I holding on to that's actually hurting me? And can I see that? And sometimes I can, and sometimes I can't. But can I see that and then do my best to let go a little bit? Sometimes I can't. But even the intention to do so makes a difference, right? Even if I can't, let's say, okay, well, I invite you to bring in some contentment, and we know the inner monologue thing, and it's like, okay, but the inner monologue's not shutting up right now. Because sometimes it happens. A lot of the time that happens. But then the relationship part of it is that's okay too, right? It's unpleasant. It's just unpleasant. So what I might do is, why it's not like this and it should be like this, and why am I not like this? And I get tighter and tighter and tighter, and I have all this rope burn on my hands because I'm trying to hold on to something that I can't hold on to. And then again, same thing with when things feel more pleasant. I'm going to experience it and enjoy it, and it's not going to last. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but just because everything's changing. So, and then there's the other piece that was mentioned earlier, is the neutral. And neutral is actually, the translation is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. They shorten it to neutral because no one wants to say neither pleasant nor unpleasant over and over again. But when something is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, it doesn't kind of fit with that happiness, schema. So we kind of are told to dismiss it, ignore it. But if you kind of pay attention just a little bit to surely some parts of this moment right now, I imagine, are neither pleasant nor unpleasant for you. I'm guessing they're not totally all, unpleasant or totally pleasant. Neither pleasant nor unpleasant is kind of a nice place to hang out in, right? As you were saying, nothing's particularly happening, just sitting here. But that means I have nothing to chase after and nothing to get rid of. In some ways, contentment again is that for me. It's that right now it's like this. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. But I get to decide how I relate to it. Yeah. Yes, last thing. So to go back to what Phil was saying before, when we started talking about this and I said I wanted to do this talk, it was because I had just discovered, well, maybe I was taught before, but at least it felt like I just discovered this whole new thing with respect to meditation. Because when I learned meditation, and then still when I have taught it to people, sort of the line that we were taught was meditation or mindfulness are not about being calm. It's not about being relaxed. And that makes sense, because on the one hand, they're not, right? It's not, the goal is not to be calm. The goal is not to be relaxed. The goal in many ways is, relationship and compassion and seeing clearly and all of that stuff. And I was gonna say no one says this, but people actually say the opposite. We can use contentment and kindness any way that we want as a way to tap into a framework where I actually feel like I want to be with this present moment, right? This is like, okay, be mindful, meditate, just sit there and breathe and just watch things come and go. And then sometimes my brain goes, I don't want to do that, or I can't do that, or everything feels so chaotic or aversive, unfriendly, that I can't. I don't have access to that. There have been times where I feel like I can't meditate because it's just not a friendly place to be. And so I've this number of months ago really got into this approach where the first part of a meditation, the first and many other parts of a meditation practice, can be deliberately using the breath and other things. It's like making the water friendlier to swim in. And so there are these few practices that I now do before I'm going to get into, really awareness or the meditation itself. That sort of thing. Like just giving myself some really deep breaths, a deep sigh, just kind of using the breath. We say, often teachers say, don't change the breath. You don't have to manipulate it or make it special, but you can deliberately cultivate these qualities that are helpful. This is where, again, my language fails me, but I have this thing that I do, and the only way I can describe it is smiling in my mind. In my mind, heart, my whole system. So as I'm beginning a meditation, I just have this kind of thing. And again, it's all in here. I don't know how to articulate it, but it's almost that sense of smiling, like letting your mind smile, your heart, even bringing a small smile to your face. And it's not like I'm trying to make myself happy, but it is like, like if you're running a bath for someone or for yourself. I have a daughter at home, so you're running a bath and you just make sure the temperature is the right temperature. Sometimes you need to add a little bit more hot, right? Sometimes you need to add a little bit more cold. And so sometimes part of what we can do is deliberately cultivate these things. So yeah, I get to choose to bring a little bit of this more into my relationship. Oh, it's a little bit helpful to take some deeper breaths and slow down. That's not denying this moment or trying to change it. It's just I'm deciding what's helpful for me in any given moment and then relating to that in a way that feels helpful. So that was sort of the last piece that I wanted to address, is that contentment is a relationship. To me, it's a verb. And it is this ongoing process. And because it's a verb, then it's something that I can choose to do when I want to, when it's skillful or when it's helpful for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
That was my pleasure.
So we are going to throw this open to question and answer. Bear in mind, this is an educational forum, so I wouldn't be asking personal related questions. And the questions that you do ask, we want to allow as many questions as we can entertain tonight, because we're lucky we have Nicole here. We can ask her anything on mindfulness. So keep it succinct, keep it to the point. And Nicole, when you answer your question, could you repeat the question so that we could pick it up for the recording? So, are there any questions you might have for Nicole related to contentment, happiness, mindfulness, and driving?
I can't tell the difference sometimes then with anger or contentment, discontentment. Like I didn't have the same lovely experience that this lady had driving over it. When I parked my car, I got stuck in the snow. And I thought I wasn't gonna get out. I was really discontent, I was mad, frustrated.
Totally.
And I was spinning out, and I finally got out and turned around. But I came in a bit rattled.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, mellowed out.
Yeah.
But I certainly wasn't content out there. I wanted to smash my car.
I love the honesty. Yeah.
So, but is that anger? Is that discontent? I don't know what the difference is. I don't get it.
It's a great question. So the question is about the very similar drive experience that you and I both had on the way here, because I also almost got stuck and there was a lot of anger, and I'm not going to say I yelled at people in my car, but I might have. So the question is, if I'm experiencing that frustration, that sense of anger, really what is that? There's so many ways to answer this question, but one thing I want to say first is that sometimes it's just anger, right? I'm just angry, and that's not bad. Because we all get angry. Of course we do, and we all get sad, and we all get frustrated, and someone's going to have a different experience with the drive than someone else. So what the powerful part of what you're talking about is how much you noticed it, right? You noticed that you came in here and you felt really rattled, right? You weren't, immediately sitting down necessarily feeling any other way. The big piece in that for me, again, is not the anger. It's your relationship to the anger. Sometimes you're just angry, and it's okay to be angry. And of course, there's a line there, right? But for our purposes, if it goes back to contentment, maybe isn't the word here so much for when you're angry, but okayness, equanimity. So if you're angry, you get to be angry, and you get to be angry for a bit, and you come in here and you feel rattled, and then we get to watch that change and allow it to change. And sometimes it changes quickly, and sometimes it changes slowly. Where it becomes, I would suggest, discontent is when I'm still stuck in the drive that happened 5 weeks ago, sitting here now. Because my mind is still there. But when I'm in it and I'm stuck in the thing, yeah, I'm angry. So I guess the mindful approach would be to acknowledge the anger, to feel it, to let it be present within, reasonable and healthy capacity, without adding to it, without adding the identification, what's wrong with me, why am I such an angry person, I should never drive ever again, that spinning that so many of us let our minds do. Not saying that that's where you went with it. And then where contentment for me comes in there is, okay, now what? Okay, I had that angry thing, that was really rough. Now what? How can I hold that with kindness? How can I give myself out, again, the rope burn thing, how can I just at least slowly, very slowly maybe, just let go of it? And you might still feel that anger, but it doesn't have the same hold on you. It's like there's this phrase, what we resist persists. Maybe you've heard that. So much of the time, this is very awkward to do with a camera, if I may. So much of the time, right, this is the thing I don't like. And then I'm holding it in my hand. And so much of the time, there's this thing I don't like, and it's in my hand, it's part of my life, and I don't like it so much, and I hate it, and I'm holding on to it, and I just hate it so much that I just get tighter and tighter and tighter around it. And now not only is it still in my hand, but now my hand hurts. Actually really hurts. So the other option, it's still there, right? In this instance, it's all blurry, so you can't really see it. It's still there. This thing, I don't like it. It's still there. But my relationship to it has changed because now I'm not resisting it. I'm letting it be there. Does that answer the question in a roundabout sort of way?
So on a very practical point to Mitch's question
Yeah.
here, it seems that we are preference making.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I want something or I don't. So in a very practical way, can you explain it? It's not just anger is there. There's a reason why we create our reality and create our preferences.
Yes.
So could you explain to the group, how is it that we create our preferences? And then more importantly,
Yeah.
how do we be with the preference? We can't just will our way to
Very well said.
whatever you want. So can we give the group a strategy that says, I'm gonna let this be? And how do you do it?
Sometimes you can. A lot of the time, I can't. Being perfectly honest. For me, sometimes it helps to think of how many, how varied, how wide, how old, and how new causes and conditions go into any given moment. So the driving example, right? It's not just the drive. It's not just that moment with the snow. It's every other time I've driven anywhere. It's all of my previous experiences getting stuck and dealing with the whole thing and someone pushing me out or having to call whomever. It's what I ate that day or didn't eat, how much coffee I had or didn't have, right? The fight that I had with someone the day before or the nice thing someone said to me the day before. And it goes back, depending on how you look at it, right? This goes back not only to my childhood and any sort of trauma, capital T or lowercase t, but also generations before that. What my parents taught me about driving in the snow, maybe. So this doesn't sound like practical advice, but there's something about that to me that's kind of a big deal, because it's not just what the hell is wrong with me right now. To be clear, it's not that, oh, all of these things are wrong with me. It's, oh, of course. Like, of course that this triggered me, or of course this got me frustrated, because I was on my way to something that I cared about or wanted to go to, and I had this particular expectation that came from this other thing. So it's not just, oh, this is all my fault in this very moment. This moment's the worst. But I can see that there are all these things that kind of come together to lead to this moment. And then so part of that makes me see that, okay, so I might be primed to act in a particular way, which is the basis of, well, both karma and neuroplasticity, depending on which way you want to look at it. I'm primed to act in a certain way. I'm more likely to. I'm late all the time, honestly, and I really try not to be, and I'm not a very organized person, and I really try to be organized, and challenged at that. And so I'm always running late, not terribly late, but always just a little bit late. And every time I do, it drives me crazy. And I get mad at myself every time. I haven't changed that, but I still get, I'm aware of that. But there's no fatalism to it. Yeah, that's a tendency. Yes, this is a pattern. It's a pattern I now see. And so even the awareness of it starts to shift something. And then the choices that I make start to shift something. And maybe the getting rattled, right? This practical thing is you come in here and you're rattled. And it's like, oh, I'm just rattled again. Again, not speaking to you, I'm speaking to my experience. But maybe this time it lasts for 2 minutes instead of 5. Maybe one time it lasts for 8, this time it lasts for 10, another time it lasts for 5. I think the practical part of this, and it's not overwhelming, it doesn't come with a bang, but is just noticing those shifts. It's both the shifts actually in the agency. Like even if I'm primed to be a certain way or all these conditions come together, there's always a tiny bit of choice. There's always a little bit of shift. It's actually always different. Sometimes feels the exact same, but even your breath, if you're being mindful or meditating with your breath, the breaths all feel the same. After a while, it's like, okay, this is boring. Like, why am I? Yeah, breathe in, breathe out. But if you really look closely, they're all different. And so the practical, perhaps, tool in that is 1 or 3, maybe, to look at those conditions, to see that what we are is this product of all these conditions, and that we have some say in them. So then looking for those little shifts, little changes, watching how things change. And it's a little bit of the state versus trait thing. I don't know if anyone's heard that framing, but in a single moment, it's a state, not a trait, right? Yeah, there's a lot of anger here right now, but there's a difference between the feeling of anger versus I'm an angry person. And as soon as it becomes I'm an angry person, I've taken all of that shift and changed and like solidified it. And now it's bad. Whereas if I could kind of use some of the things I talked about before, it's like, okay, I'm really angry right now. Of course it makes sense that I'm angry. It's okay that I'm angry. It's unpleasant, period. But I'm really, really angry. Yeah, no, I got you. It's like me talking to my brain. It's unpleasant. I don't have to do anything with that afterwards. And that is very easy, well, maybe, to say, and not at all easy to do at various times, which again is why we practice it. Because sometimes it'll come totally naturally, like, yeah, I got that. And then the next 5 times, like, what? I got it the one time? It's just, again, causes and conditions and that chance to practice. It's a very long-winded answer to the question.
How is contentment different from acceptance? And how is it the same?
Yeah. How is contentment different than acceptance? It's a great question that I don't know if I have a great answer to. And what I want to do, and this is not at all because I'm avoiding the question, because I will answer it, I promise, but I'd actually rather to turn it back to you almost. I'm not going to put you on the spot.
Thank you.
But because if you ask the question, there's something in you that knows that there's something to look at in the answer. So I can give you my take on it, but I'm actually way more interested in the question itself, because maybe they're the same for you. Maybe they're totally not. Yeah, I'll give you an answer. I'd invite you to sort of just check that out if you want. To me, the difference between contentment and acceptance, I really got to think about this one. I think they're all adjacent. contentment, ease, acceptance, somewhat adjacent. I think for me, I would say there's a difference for me, and some people disagree on this, between acknowledging something and accepting something. And that's usually one of the steps sort of we talk about in mindfulness, right? Like there's the awareness of it, there's the acknowledgement of it, and then the relationship to it, kindness, non-judgment, all that stuff. To me, acceptance kind of says, I like it, or it's okay. I think I can be content, relating to contentment to something that I don't fully accept. I acknowledge it. I see it's there. I don't have to like it to be content, connected to it. There's a little bit of semantics, perhaps. I think,
Or is it the same?
I think for a lot of people they're synonymous, and I think that there are some nuances in there. I think it really, for me, it's the distinction between what is acknowledgement and what is acceptance. Because any moment of mindfulness, I'm going to acknowledge what's there, but I don't always like it. And it's not always pleasant. And sometimes with acceptance comes, for some of us, there's sort of that sense of, I'm supposed to like it and everything's supposed to be okay.
It's like Donald Trump won the election. Do you have to accept the results? Versus you have to live with it. I just sort of think
It's a little bit of, right, I can't change what I can't see. So if I'm not paying attention to something, then I have no awareness of it. So the first step of it is awareness. And then from that, then I get to decide, okay, what am I gonna do with that? How am I gonna relate to that?
This acceptance may not have, you may not have choice, right? I'm gonna
In the
put you-
content,
So it's a sense at times of resignation, of no choice, which is very different than what you're defining as contentment.
Yes,
Whether
I
it-
guess to me it is the difference between acknowledgement and acceptance, but this is, again, this is how I'm looking at it, so that's why I said, like, I'd be really curious to what you came up with. The other thing about this is, in some ways it doesn't matter. And not, like, the question's a beautiful question, but me talking about what my distinction between happiness or joy or contentment, that stuff maybe makes sense to me. But in a lot of ways it doesn't matter, because it's about how it shows up for you and how you relate to it. So some words are gonna really land with you and other ones aren't. And so just like some ways some teachers talk or some practices, like, yeah, I really got that one. Like, no, that one is not for me. So sometimes for me, some words really land and other ones really don't. And my happiness thing might actually be as simple as that. It's just, that's what works for me. Yeah.
She's gonna ask a question.
That's fine.
I thought maybe we could talk a bit about uncertainty, because most of us have uncertainty in our life. Uncertainty, maybe element of a relationship, personal relationship, uncertainty about
Everything.
Many things, many situations, financial, et cetera, et cetera,
Totally.
et cetera. So how do we get to a sense of, what did you call it there? A sort of a contentment relationship with uncertainty, because you're anxious, sometimes you're anxious.
Totally.
Fearful, angry, especially with personal relationships, which are really difficult to know.
Do you want to add to the question?
Well, I'd just like to bring it to what we've just discussed.
Yeah.
Is that an incident happens, you find yourself angry, which is a normal reaction. It's healthy to be angry. But if you're mindful that you flip into anger every time a situation arises, or to flip into uncertainty every time you find yourself. And then the opportunity is to see what is happening with you. Because with anger, the thinking part of your brain turns off. You don't get anything accomplished.
Oh, I can stand back
So-
and observe it, but
so
to
I-
detach from it is very difficult.
So let me rephrase the question, as I also know we're getting a little bit short on time. So the question, and they all do, you're right, they totally relate. So this question about, you know, how do I deal with uncertainty, the feeling of uncertainty? And I like things when they're certain, right? It's a species-wide thing. We like order and we don't like chaos, generally speaking. And some of what tends to bother us with uncertainty is just that, right? Like it's the lack of knowing. Right? I don't know how the financial situation is gonna go. And it fits in with this question, you know, of anger, because sometimes that feels uncertain. How am I supposed to feel? Why is this coming out, right? My brain feels like it's shut off, and that can be scary. I think one of the things for me in dealing with uncertainty is sitting with discomfort, which doesn't often feel nice. And when it comes to uncertainty, our brains will do their very, very best to try and give us some sort of certainty, right? That's what brains are so good at thinking. Our brains are brilliant at the problem solving bit. They're not so good at just the being uncomfortable bit. So when uncertainty arises, if you can solve it through thinking, great, awesome, go for it. Most of those bigger things that you're talking about, right, I'm not going to be able to solve just through thinking. And then so part of what, again, to look at something a little bit more practical, I'd say part of what it is asking myself when I'm churning, you know, the thought, like the hamster wheel thoughts, especially at 3 a.m, is this helpful right now? It's a very deceptively simple question. Is this do I want to be thinking this thought right now? Is this helpful right now? The answer is almost always no.
So you're making a choice,
I'm asking myself the question.
or you're preferring not.
So in that, your question is a really good one, right? Am I making a choice? Am I bringing in a preference? This is where we balance wisdom and compassion. You're wise. We all have wisdom. You all know, you know so much more than I do about your experiences, which is why I said, you know, you were going to have a better answer to the question than I am. If you really are in it and you're in that hamster wheel and you ask yourself that question, this is seriously really good if you're thinking the same thought at 3 a.m, because the answer to that at that time is always no. Do I want to be thinking this thought? No, I would rather be sleeping. So if I ask myself then, and part of me, there's a small part of me maybe that's not thinking, that's not angry, that's not caught up, and it's going to say no, I don't want to be thinking that thought right now. It's not going to make the thought go away. This is where the piece of choice comes in. But it's given me this tiniest little crack of space. So then the next time the thought comes up, because it will, I was like, oh, I already know I don't want to be thinking that thought right now. Then the crack opens up a little bit wider. Thought's still going to come back. But I now have some awareness of it. So there's me thinking this thought, but there's also this awareness sort of that's looking down, meta-awareness, right? Looking down on it. And I might have to keep doing that over and over again. Like, do I want to be thinking this thought? Is it helpful right now? Is it skillful is another way to look at it. Am I just stuck in these causes and conditions, all of these things that came into this moment? And then so when it comes back to the uncertainty, sometimes it's just looking at the pattern of thinking. Am I stuck in the content of the thoughts? Okay, what if I try to step back and just say, is this helpful? what if I just try to breathe for a second? That's why anything to do with your body is really helpful, especially in some sort of uncertainty or churning that feeling, right? Stuck in the monologue, move your body. Any which way you can, not saying go exercise, aerobics class or anything like that, but something that is put on some music, dance, do push-ups if that's your thing, go for a walk, just deep breaths or stretching, anything that gets you in your body will help kind of get some space from those thoughts. And then a lot of it with uncertainty is, this is really uncomfortable. And letting it be uncomfortable, which again, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. But there's something in the allowing that to be there that lets go of that rope burn sort of feeling. But knowing that it's not all gonna feel pleasant, but that's okay too. Doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Doesn't mean you're doing life wrong. Just sometimes, again, the joys and the sadness, it all kind of comes together.
And the big problem is about uncertainty. Do you know what your next thought is going to be? You don't know what your mind is going to say to you. Do you know what your partner is going to say to you? Do you know what your boss is going to say to you? The only thing about life that is certain is uncertainty. And so that means is you're creating conflict for yourself by being in resistance to what is natural. The reality is, and just one last point, do you think you have free will?
Oh God.
They did this experiment. They put these people in an MRI machine, brain scanner. They said, Nicole, we're going to give you a clicker in the left hand and give you a clicker in the right hand. And when you're ready, you choose which hand you want to click. 1 second before Nicole chose which hand she wanted, the MRI scanner predicted 80% which hand she was going to choose. Our brains process everything subconsciously, throws it into our consciousness, and then we say, I thought that. And a beautiful comment. Descartes says what? I think, therefore I am. Ambrose Bierce, an 18th century American, I think that I think, therefore I think that I am.
Ram Dass does a version of it too, where he says, there's the cogito ergo sum, right? I think, therefore I am. And he says you get rid of the ergo, you get rid of the therefore. I think, I am. And they're actually two different things. So you get to watch yourself being a thinking being. Of course you're thinking. We have something like 100,000 thoughts a day, right? Many of them we don't control or ask for. So when I'm thinking, I let it be okay that I'm thinking. Like I don't have to add that friction to it. And then once I'm aware of that, then I get to ask some questions. Like, do I need to go for a walk right now? Do I need to talk to someone? Do I want to be thinking this thought? And then underlying all of that is kindness and compassion as much as we can. Reminding ourselves, practicing that as much as we can. And then between those sort of pillars, compassion and wisdom, we generally make our way through. It just doesn't often feel, as certain as we would like it to. And again, that's really easy to say. And when I try to practice it, it's like, but it was so easy to say. And sometimes it's really not easy to do. But that's okay too. That's the other piece of it. Like, this is okay. I just get to acknowledge that. Let that uncertainty, that discomfort be okay. Even if I don't like it, it's okay.
We're coming to the end of the evening here, and so I know time is important for you. Perhaps you could just summarize what you've talked about and give 2 or 3 takeaway points so that everybody can go home with contentment.
No pressure though. Number 1. You're doing great. No joke, I'm not even skipping over the fact that I don't know what the 3 points should be. That is number one, you're doing great. And sometimes it doesn't feel great. A lot of the time it doesn't feel great. And it's so easy to look at that person and it's like, oh, well, they've got it all figured out. But there's something really nice in that, and whether that's your phrase or some other one, write it down, like put it in front of your computer screen, a mirror, anything. Change them, because then you'll stop seeing it after a while, like the laundry that's on my stairs right now. But there's that sense of like, it's okay, I am okay how I am. You're not gonna rest in like, wait, well now I don't have to do anything. That's never a fear of mine when I say that sort of thing. But there's a lot of that, I'm okay. How I am is okay. It's okay to be how I am. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be angry. And then, so that would be point number one. Then point number two is knowing when, what that line is. Okay, you've been angry for a while. Like, come on, let's have a little powwow here. Apologize. It's come up. Language has come up twice in the last little while for me. I've never used that word before, and it is not an okay word to say, and I apologize sincerely. I want to take a moment with myself, and even though I'm not blaming myself, because I know that's not helpful, I also still get to take responsibility. And where I like that word is because it's the ability to respond. So I'm not just stuck in my patterns. Number one, I'm doing great. You're doing great, right? This being human thing is really hard. And number two, I get to check in with myself and see what's happening. See how I want to relate to it. See if I need some help or need some, reminders. Need to take a breath, practice some more meditation, anything. And then the third part I would say is that the way out of contentment is trying to make everything perfect. And perfect is whatever you think it is. It should be like this. So the more expectations it should be like this. Then I'm never gonna get to contentment, because it's never gonna get to how I think it should be. And even if it does, it's gonna change a minute later. So you're doing great. Finding the balance of when, we need to push ourselves a little bit, sort of ask those questions. And then really focusing on the relationship rather than the content. Even if this moment isn't exactly how I want it to be, if I relax that relationship a little bit, let go of a little bit of those expectations, or even just be aware of them, then I can invite in contenting. Can I just change it to a verb? I can contenting rather than a state of contentment.
We've been so fortunate to have Nicole present again. She does a marvelous job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.